The fog is lifting. Clarity is calling you forward. Welcome to Forward in Freedom. I'm Tanya Johnson. This is where awareness becomes power. Let's move forward in freedom.
Have you ever started becoming healthier, more grounded, more clear about what you will and will not tolerate? And suddenly the people around you become uncomfortable. Once you stopped over explaining, stopped overextending, stopped carrying everyone emotionally, certain relationships started feeling strained. And that can feel confusing because you're becoming healthier, yet the response around you suddenly feels more tense. You tuned into the right episode because today we're talking about what happens when your growth becomes visible and the people around you don't respond well. What many people don't realize is this: growth doesn't just change your decisions, it changes the emotional systems around you. And when a system has benefited from your flexibility, your silence, your constant adjustment, your growth can feel disrupted. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because the version of you they built expectations around is changing. This is the part people rarely discuss. Everyone celebrates healing in theory, but in real life, healing changes dynamics. You become harder to manipulate, harder to guilt, harder to emotionally manage, harder to pressure. And when that happens, people notice, not always consciously, but relationally. At work, this often shows up in subtle ways. You stop answering emails late into the night, and suddenly your commitment is questioned. You stop volunteering for every extra task, and suddenly your attitude is being discussed. You become more direct in meetings, and suddenly people say you've changed. Family dynamics often react strongly to change. You stop being the emotional fixer in your family, and suddenly people call you distant. You no longer absorb disrespect quietly, and suddenly gatherings feel tense. You stop saying yes automatically, and suddenly people act hurt. In personal relationships, you stop over explaining your boundaries, and suddenly communications feel strained. You stop chasing resolution, and suddenly the other person says, you've become cold. Some people miss the old you because the old you required less accountability from them. One thing that I accepted personally is that healthier decisions don't always create immediate relational peace. Sometimes growth creates tension before it creates stability. One of the hardest parts of growth is realizing that becoming healthier can expose dynamics you didn't fully see before. Exposure of dynamics that only worked when you stayed quiet. Exposure of relationships built around your overfunctioning. Exposure of environments that relied more on your flexibility than your well being. And that realization can feel deeply disorienting because now you begin asking yourself, was I loved or was I useful? Was I valued or was I simply easier to manage before? That's the emotional tension many people feel but struggle to articulate. Not everyone connected to you will celebrate the version of you that requires healthier interaction. Some people preferred access over accountability. Some people were comfortable with your exhaustion because it benefited them. At this stage of growth, you're no longer just changing behavior. You are changing roles: the peacekeeper, the rescuer, the over accommodator, the emotionally available one, the person who always adjusts first. And when you stop performing those roles, people have to adapt. Some will, some won't. Some will pressure you to return to the version of yourself that made things easier for them. Growth becomes visible when people stop benefiting from your self abandonment. Let's make this practical. Resistance to your growth rarely starts as open conflict. It usually appears in smaller relational shifts. At work, you begin protecting your time. Now you're excluded from certain conversations. You stopped overperforming. Now your loyalty is quietly questioned. You stopped saying yes immediately. Now people test whether your boundaries are actually consistent. And what this reveals is important. Some environments confuse overextension with value. In families, you stop participating in unhealthy conversations. Now relatives accuse you of acting different. You stop caring emotionally for the burdens that you were never meant to carry. Now people say you're pulling away. But often what they're really reacting to is the loss of the emotional access they once had. In personal relationships, you stop explaining the same boundary repeatedly. Now frustration increases because the dynamic is no longer functioning the same way. And this is the deeper truth. People often don't react to the boundary itself. They react to losing the version of you that ignored your own needs. When access changes, reactions expose expectations. If you're listening to this and recognizing yourself, especially if you're navigating these changes at work, within your family, or in your relationships, this is exactly why support and clarity matter. Through Clear Direction Coaching, I help individuals navigate these transitions with confidence and emotional clarity. Because growth sounds empowering until it starts changing your relationships in real time. If you're ready to strengthen your boundaries, communications, and confidence, you can book a 15-minute consultation at www.cleardirectioncoaching.com. And if you're trying to better understand your relationship dynamics and patterns, the Gathering Alliance Relationship Assessment is a powerful tool to help you evaluate things with greater clarity. But recognizing patterns is only part of the journey. Living differently once you recognize them is where things become difficult. Because once growth starts affecting relationships in real time, pressure often follows. And this is where many people lose themselves again. They start managing reactions instead of maintaining alignment. They over explain, over justify, over reassure, over negotiate, trying to make everyone comfortable with the decision they already know is healthy. But clarity weakens when it constantly has to defend itself. The more you over explain healthy decisions, the more negotiable they become. As you stay consistent in your growth, three things begin happening. Some people adjust, some people distance themselves, some people test your consistency. Let's talk about the testing. Testing often looks small: a repeated request, a subtle guilt trip, a joke about your boundary, a comment meant to make you reconsider your position. Not always openly confrontational, but intentional enough to see whether your clarity moves under pressure. And here's why consistency matters. People learn what is flexible by watching what repeatedly changes. If your decisions shift every time someone becomes uncomfortable, the discomfort becomes the strategy. But when your response remains steady, something changes. The pressure loses effectiveness, and over time, people begin responding to the version of you that actually exists now, not the version you're hoping to recover. People stop testing what consistently no longer moves. Here's your freedom nugget for this week. Not everyone will celebrate a healthier version of you immediately. Some people only felt comfortable with you when you were overextending, overgiving, or overadjusting. So stop measuring the health of your growth solely by how people respond to it. Measure it by this: are you more aligned, more honest, more steady, more at peace? Because growth is not just about becoming someone new, it's refusing to abandon yourself to keep others comfortable. And every time you remain aligned under pressure, you strengthen trust in yourself. Your growth is not wrong simply because it's disrupted someone else's comfort. I want you to think about this differently today. Think about a relationship, an environment, or a dynamic that has felt more strained since you started changing. Now ask yourself, what specifically became uncomfortable once I stopped operating the way I used to? Was it my increased honesty, my boundaries, my reduced availability, my unwillingness to overfunction? My refusal to keep carrying wasn't mine. Now, here's the deeper question: am I grieving the loss of the relationship or the loss of the role I used to play inside it? That distinction can change everything, because sometimes growth feels lonely before it feels freeing. And I really love to hear from you on this one. I've responded to several of your comments already, and I know many of you have more to share about what this journey has looked like in your own life. So let's continue the conversation. Have you experienced tension in your relationships after becoming healthier or more grounded? What changed? Your story and insight may help someone else feel less alone in their own process. And if this episode brought clarity to something you've been navigating personally, don't let the conversation stop here. If today's episode spoke to where you are right now, don't just listen and move on. Take the next step. You can book a 15-minute consultation through www.cleardirectioncoaching.com. If you're navigating a relationship that's confusing or trying to better understand unhealthy dynamics, the Gathering Alliance Relationship Assessment is available in the episode notes and can help you gain powerful clarity. And if you want to go deeper into this journey, my book, A Woman's Exodus Only by Grace, walks through the process of moving from confusion into clarity and freedom. All resources and links are available in the episode notes. Looking ahead, we're diving into something many people struggle with silently. How do you care deeply without becoming emotionally responsible for everyone else? At what point does compassion become self neglect? And why do so many people confuse caring others with loving them? That conversation is going to challenge a lot of people in the best way. I'm Tanya J, and this is the work of walking forward in freedom. Until we meet again, move forward in freedom.